Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name's Mike. I'm a project coordinator here with Africa Fire Mission, and we're so happy you took time out of your schedules to join us for today's training. Today, we're joined by James Nyadwe. He's got 40 years of experience doing water rescue, and he's here today to share some of that training with us. If you guys knew this gentleman's background, you'd see he rivals the comic book character Aquaman with his water skills. So we're so happy that he's here to join us today. Before we get started, I'm going to pass it over to Richard, who's a volunteer with AFM, for a few words of encouragement. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you so much, Chief Mike. James Nyadwe, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. Everyone, every firefighter, wherever you are, feel welcome today. Today we are going to learn to be Aquaman. I don't know if it's possible. I think for me, I'm afraid of water. The best water or the highest number of waters I can be is in a basin. Full stop. Today's work, encouragement one comes from the basic life, what we call personal hygiene. I wanted us to talk about personal hygiene today. Personal hygiene, we know, basically it's defined as the cleanliness or the tidiness of a human being, but now we look at it at the perspective of the of a firefighter. We know some of this time we go to fight fires, and then our tunics, the fire gears are dirty, they are soiled, they are smoked, they are greased because you go for also rescues. Today, I wanted us to ask ourselves, how much do I take care of that fire tunic? How good am I in hygiene, like in my cleanliness, in terms of being a firefighter? The other day we saw most of us, maybe in one way or another, we have been given new tunics or we have bought new clothes for ourselves, and most of the time they go degrading. The fire tunic has a lifespan, but with the lifespan, it can also be it can go much more. It can be durable more with a proper cleaning or a proper hygiene practice that we use. Then the other challenge is we need to read on the manual, what we call the manufacturer's manual on how to clean it, how to make sure it's tidy, how to make sure it's matte, how to repair it. The manufacturer always gives us that manual. I think it's always on the inside part of the tunic. If you look at it, that it will give you it. Because remember, our fire station, our fire engines, they are full of water. So if we keep them clean, if we maintain that personal hygiene, whatever we maintain when we are at home or at other workplaces or when you're going to church, you're going for dinners, if we can be able to bring it now to the station, I believe it also helps in fighting some diseases. You remember the last time we had COVID? People were told to keep on washing their hands. I believe most of us didn't have the flu, or they didn't have what you call the driving license or the diarrhea. We didn't have so many of them. So the encouragement for today, let's keep on practicing proper hygiene, personal hygiene, station hygiene, and that will give us more lifespan in our fire services. Thank you so much. Be blessed. Feel free to ask. Today is that day. We are learning to be Aquaman. Don't try that at home, please, kindly.
Thank you, Richard, very much. We appreciate you taking your time out and giving us those words of encouragement. Just a couple administrative things. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you'll receive a certificate of attendance for today's class. Keep an eye in the chat. I'll be posting a link to our Google Drive where you can go and review this training, the additional materials. I'll put the slides for today's training in there available for you. And you can also attend any of the other trainings that we've done, our Wednesday trainings from previously in the year. And if you watch the video and answer a few questions, you'll be able to receive a certificate of attendance for those classes as well. Now, at this point in time, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to James to begin with our water rescue class. Take it away, sir.
All right, thanks, Chief Mike. Thanks, Richard. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our firefighters from whichever parts of the world you're tuning in. So like we said earlier, today we'll look at water rescue or swift water awareness. So I'll just go ahead and share the screen here so we can get started. Okay, there we go. So then, as we say here, we're talking about swift water rescue awareness. Now, remember, this is just an awareness class. What we're learning today is not for you to go out there and start using it. This is mostly just to give you information, so you have an idea of what goes on in this type of rescues. So, again, if you have any questions, hold them on till the last, and then we could go ahead and answer all your questions. So here we go. So, the objectives. Why this is important to us. So it's to provide us with a basic knowledge concerning the characteristics and the dangers of moving water. Then we'll also have specific information regarding the hazards associated with rescues from moving water. And then we're going to look at the information regarding basic equipment and the skills necessary to accomplish show-based and self-rescues. Self-rescues there is very important, and we'll look at more of that as we go along. So some background information. Now, this is from WHO, since there's some countries that kind of take more statistics on drowning. So as it says there, drowning is the leading cause of unintentional injury related mortality worldwide. So roughly 320,000 deaths yearly. Now, this could be higher depending on, whichever year or what's going on with the weather. So more people would die. But roughly who estimates, the WHO estimates about 320,000 people die per year just from drowning. So that's a lot of people, right? So let's look at flood disasters. So drowning accounts for 75% of deaths in flooding, and they're becoming more and more frequent as the weather patterns change, right? So drowning risks increase in areas that are particularly low or middle income countries where people live in flood-prone areas. Now, people wonder why this is, but because we have a lot of informal settlements. So sometimes with the informal settlements, they're not placed in the right area. It's where people get land and they build, but sometimes that area could be an old floodplain for a river or that sort of thing. Then when it rains, the river comes back flowing, and then there you have all your flooding. So let's look at some general facts on drowning. So as it says there, no one is drown proof, meaning anybody can drown. Even the guy who can swim perfectly can still drown, right? As it says there, drowning doesn't discriminate. It is fast and silent. It can happen in as little as 20 to 60 seconds. So that's about 10 seconds I kept quiet. Another 10 seconds, somebody would have died. That's how quick it happens, just like that. So drowning doesn't always look like what we would expect. It's, it can be surprising. It could happen right there as you're sitting by the edge of the pool, somebody drowns. They usually occur between 30 to 7 feet of the shore. It's usually closer to the edge of the water. That's where they happen, because it's probably somebody who fell in. As you saw, the guys who attended the video yesterday, as you saw from that video yesterday, that's what happened. It is so quick. And as it says there, it can be over in less than a minute. In children, that is the leading cause of death in ages 1 to 5. So if you have small children in that age group of 1 to 5, you need to be very careful with them when you're around water. So another overview. Africa has a lot of drainage channels and a lot of ponds, lakes, reservoirs, man-made or otherwise. So this training will provide you with the basic information to keep you safe and also to give you effective response awareness for a responder, right? So it will give you an idea of what to do in certain scenarios, because Africa, you realize for the fire department, you get called out for any and everything. They assume that you're a fireman, then you can deal with all these incidences that happen. So let's look at the characteristics and dangers of moving water. So water moves very quickly. It can move between 9 to 45 miles per hour. Now, averagely, they say it's 30 miles per hour, which is about 48 kilometers per hour. Now, if you think about 48 kilometers per hour, that is pretty fast for water moving. So it can it can take you really fast, right? Swimming ability is not a factor in water that moves that fast. At 48 kilometers per hour, it doesn't matter if you're an Olympic swimmer, it will still sweep you away, right? So you may not be able to stand in that water because it's pushing at you with such a great force. So as it says there also, 1 foot of water can displace about 680 kilograms from the total weight of the vehicle. So if you look at the images here, you'd see like this first one, the matatu is stuck there, or the passenger van. These others, these guys in these vehicles, they thought that the weight of the vehicle was strong enough to take him through the water, but you don't realize that it's so powerful and it displaces so much weight from your vehicle. Hence, you end up getting pushed to one side. Same thing with the image down here. And then also over here, this is like in a city. So you see in the city also, you went to work in the morning, you didn't expect something, it rained, then on your way home, you come across a situation like this. This is so easy for you to fall in and get swept away because the power of the water is really strong. So those are just some things to be aware of. You know, don't cross through such places with water if you have a vehicle, as tempting as it will be seem. In your 4-wheel drive, you know, it will still still float away. So low-level water crossing. This one usually happens maybe the river busts the banks and goes over the road. So you end up having situations like this. These are very high risk, and cars can become strainers. Like remember from yesterday's training, the strainers is something that water can pass through, but you as a human being will not be able to pass through. So you can get trapped against it. So imagine you're trapped against a vehicle like this. The water is pushing on you and it has covered your head. So you're constantly ingesting water that's constantly pushing at you. So the vehicles become very dangerous. So in a situation like this, we would need to calm the vehicle down and then assess if the vehicle is stable, because remember the vehicle is moving, or it can move in the water. The pressure of the water keeps on pushing it. So, and sometimes you find the victim stands on top of the vehicle, but you know, as the water continues to fill up, then they may slip and they may fall. As you can see from these pictures out here, this is a crowd standing on a road that's been covered by water. You see an individual trying to cut across, but you can already see the pressure of the water around his legs. Same thing here in the city again, guys getting, devising ways to try and get across a path, but you see the water down here is raging, and if it takes you, it's probably end up being not good. Right here on this picture, you see the crowd trying to pull someone, but you can see just even the agitation in the water just lets you know how much pressure there is around there, or how much force the water has. And same thing with here, this is a bridge, but the water level is rising and can even cover the bridge. So those are just some of the things we got to look at, especially on the low water crossings. So hazards associated with rescues from moving water. So you get called out there, you went on a rescue, it started raining, it turned out it's crazy rain. Now what do we do? So there's a possibility for the personnel who enter the water. There's a risk of you getting submerged in there, you can get entangled, there's the cold water shock, there's hypothermia. Ultimately, you can also drown. Floating debris is also a serious hazard in water rescue because it can cause entanglement, it can pin you, or it can crush you because the water will move a lot of things. It can move vehicles. So imagine being pinned by a vehicle. You know, there's no way you can move, there's no way you can push that vehicle off you. So it's also recommended if you're walking on foot in water, like especially, you know, parts of Kenya, those guys who are from Kenya, you know, like areas like Nyanza, Ahero, where it floods out with water, and you have the guys trying to walk from their house to get to a rescue center. So it's really good to have a stick or a pole to use. So you put it in front of you and kind of check the grounds as you walk through it. Because what can happen is it can identify a trench or a manhole or something like that. Because if you fall into a trench and the water is moving, you may injure yourself, you may ultimately get entangled or even end up drowning. So water is very powerful and relentless, but it's predictable. So if you're in a stream, the first action we should do if you're, you know, going for rescue, you've been called out there, said somebody drowned or somebody's missing in the water, what you can do is mark the water levels so that you know, is it rising or is it going down or is it staying the same? And then do an orientation, know where the upstream is, know where the downstream is, know where the left side is, know where the right side is, so that as you communicate to your team, everybody's on the same page and you can all monitor the changing conditions. So if it is a show-based water rescue, you're likely to encounter a crowd of people. You know, you'll have bystanders, you'll have victims, you'll have families, you'll have the media, you'll have EMS, fire, or law enforcement there. So it's good to get these rescuers to help you to create a barrier or to hold people at bay so they don't interfere with what you're doing. Because a lot of the times, imagine the bystanders get too close to the water and they end up falling in. So instead of having 2 guys, now you have 6 guys in the water. So that's added pressure on you. So we use them to help us. So again, just as important, it's good to deploy our resources upstream and downstream so that we always have somebody to see. So we have somebody upstream who can let us know if there's debris coming. Someone says, hey, the guys, there's a car floating down the street or down the river. So it alerts the guys who are there to be able to move off or to take cover so that they don't get swept off by the vehicle or they don't get hit by the vehicle. And when you have your spotters, give them whistles. Now remember, there are 2 kinds of whistles. Yes, there's the whistle that has like a little P in it, like the ones they use in the soccer field or for games. Then there's the one that doesn't have that little P in it. That's the one you need so that when it gets wet, it can still function and you can still hear somebody. So still on the hazards. So just a reminder, again, we need to deploy our backups upstream and downstream, just like we do when we are on the fire ground. Remember, they are there to assist any rescuers or victims who fall in, because remember, even the rescuer, you can fall into the water, you can slip, right? So you need your upstream and backstream spotters there, upstream, downstream, so that you have them there to see. Then remember, some of these things that you might be told to do as a team, it may not be the most glamorous position. You know, you said, no, I want it to be there where we're doing the actual rescue. But remember, we're not in it for the glory, right? We're here to help people. Even if you don't save somebody, you're still doing your job. You're part of a team. The team takes the credit, not the individual, right? So situations like this is what we're talking about. You see this whole crowd of people sitting here and somebody tries to venture in, because look at the water where it's reached on the level of the vehicle, but it's probably moving and it's probably got an undercurrent that is strong. So it's very easy for someone to get swept off. So let's look at some practices or absolutes in water rescue. These are things that we should do or we should keep in mind. So if you're on a water rescue, wear your personal flotation device, your PFD. Wear a helmet as well, because remember, we've got to protect our head. Always deploy downstream spotters so that they let you know if there's anything coming towards your team. Very important, right? Because remember, at that time, your team is concentrating on the rescue. So they may not have time to keep on looking around because they're focused on what they're doing. So if they have somebody to warn them, then that way they get a heads up when something is coming. So I put this in red because it's really important. So you and your safety is the priority. Your partner and your team will come second, and the victim is the last. So just remember, make decisions with your head. Don't get emotional, because if you get emotional, then you start doing things that are out of procedure. So always try and maintain your composure. It's very, very important, especially in scenarios like this. It's so easy to get carried away and you start thinking with your heart. We are all humans, so it will happen. If you're a parent and it's a child that's lost, then you will tend to gravitate to want to do extra. So just try and stick to your procedures so that way you and your team come home safely. Then always have a backup plan, because sometimes things don't work the way you want them to. And remember, put your downstream backups. You know, have people who will let you know what's going on. Keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated. Simple is easy. Simple is adjustable. Simple is everybody can understand, right? Always have the right equipment. Have the right equipment for the task at hand. Never put your feet down if you're swept away and swimming. So they're talking about if you're in the river. As they say, don't put your foot down because the pressure of the water keeps on pushing you. So you'll be using up too much energy just trying to stand. Go with the flow of the water. So you only do that unless you're entering or leaving an eddy. An eddy is where the water comes and it sits right there blocking it. So you need to stand up to get out of there, right? Or you're chasing a distressed swimmer, or you're approaching a pile of debris or a strainer, which could be a vehicle, could be twigs, could be logs, right? Another thing, never count on the victim to help in his or her rescue. If anything, they will hinder you or they may even kill you, right? Remember, this person is panicked. They're fighting for their life. So at that time, they may not really hear a thing you're saying. So it's up to you to take control of the situation. Another thing is never tie a rope around a rescuer. To secure a rescuer, attach any lines to a quick release blowout strap. And I'll show you some pictures of that as we go along. Remember, when you tie a rope around a rescuer, what happens is if they get entangled, they can end up getting caught in debris. So you want to have a strap or attach a line where he can release it if you see he's getting entangled or he's getting caught up in something, right? So that's why we need that. Never lose contact with your victim if you can. So you always want to keep them in sight. So that way you're able to formulate the best mode of action. And then if you're given the choice between a fire helmet and no helmet, don't put on a helmet, because remember the fire helmet is not designed for going into the water, and it gets heavy and cumbersome. It may end up injuring you. Another thing is always be proactive. You know, proactive means you're thinking outside the box and you're prepared for whatever will come. So another thing we're going to look at is why this PPE is important, right? One of the biggest things is just like we have the PPE for when we go on the fires, here, this PPE also provides physical protection. Every piece we wear serves a purpose, right? So it protects us from different hazards. So we look at some of the equipment and then some of the what it does. So the helmet protects our heads while traveling at speed. That's if you're in a boat or in bad weather conditions. And imagine if you're in the water and you were to fall and you hit a stone, you could black out. You know, it may injure your head. So the helmet works very well. And remember, the helmets have vents on the top so the water can go out of it. Life jackets keeps you afloat should you fall overboard from a rescue water or into the water. If you fell from a vessel or you fell into the water. Gloves are very important for your hands because in the water, your hands do get cold. And after some time, you lose the dexterity for your hands. So your hands get numb and you can't really use them well. So the gloves keep you safe and also protect your hands. The wetsuit is it's like a tracksuit that you put on. So it's made up of neoprene of different thickness. Also that keeps you warm and things and scratches from rocks and sticks and other things like that. So it's very important to have one. And then booties, these are the shoes that we put on. So it protects your feet. Remember, when you're walking in a situation that maybe it's in the city, there may be something on the ground that can tear your feet up or it can get your feet caught up. So it's very, very important to protect your feet. So in overall, the PPE is always required. Remember, like if you're in the normal fire service, then you need it for when you go out on a call out. So here in the water rescue side, it helps you to do your job properly. It gives you that confidence also to do your job well. So you're not worried about the cold or other things that may distract you. So let's look at some equipment, right? So we're talking about the suits. So this is the one in red is called a dry suit. What this one does, it stops the water from going onto your body or into your body, as you'd say. Now, the difference between this, the dry suit and the wet suit is, the wet suit, it lets water in, but the water stays between the suit and your skin, and your body temperature warms up that water, so thereby keeps you warm. So that's the difference between the wetsuit and the dry suit. The dry suit doesn't let any water in, but the wetsuit will let a little water in, and your body kind of warms up that water, and it also keeps you warm. Then you have your helmet, you have a light, you have your PFD, you have your gloves, you have a whistle, you have your throw bag, you have your booties, and then also you have your stuff in there. That way, if you're called out, then all your equipment is in one place. And then this is a picture of the guys actually training. You see they've got their throw bags all out there with the ropes. They've got all their straps attached and the guys are holding each other. And you see it's very important to have you be fully kitted, right? So that you guys are all safe. So how much does this stuff cost? Because I know that's a lot of things mostly people ask a lot. How much does it all cost? So this is in pounds, but I converted it to dollars and then also to Kenya shillings for those in Kenya. So it says here, you got a helmet, you got the helmet here, you got a dry suit, you got gloves, you got a rescue knife, you got your personal flotation device, you got your cowtail, your thermal undersuit that goes under your dry suit to keep you warm. And then also, depending on the country where you're in, they may have a training program for it. So this whole pictures over here, this whole scenario here, plus the training would cost about $1,857, right? Or if you're in Kenya, 263,000 and some change, right? So if you're doing just the training alone, it would be about $815, right? Or in Kenya shillings, 115,000 and some change. So it's not cheap, right? And it's mostly a lot of times when you start doing something like this, the initial cost is high, but you see this equipment, if you take care of your equipment well, it can last you for a long time. So the initial cost may be high, but over time, it pays for itself because the people will be able to save having the right equipment, or if you're well prepared, becomes a big benefit. So we look at the personal flotation devices, right? They're in different shapes and different styles, just like you have shoes. You have so many different types of personal flotation devices. And as you see, this is the one that they recommend for our Swift water because it has these straps here that go under the body. Remember, most vests that don't have this strap, when you get into the water, it tends to ride up. So it rides up all the way up to over here. So that really, you want to be able to see, right? And have that vision of 360. So these are just a few things that you can attach to your vest, right? So makes it quite fancy. Makes you look like a movie star, if you're into that sort of thing. So, and this is what a rescue technician would be. Remember when we talk about the rescue technician, this is the final stage of all, you go from the awareness to the operations to now the level of a technician. And this is how you dress as a Swift water rescue technician. So hopefully down the road, this is where we want to be for all our different countries, right? So that when we go out there, you inspire confidence. Because you think about it, if you're a victim and you see somebody like this coming up to you, even if you had lost strength, then you'd be like, I'm saved, I'm saved, I'm saved. So it gives you that morale, to keep going, So we want to look professional and also be professional in our job. So now we're talking about us as individuals. Why is water survival important? So the likelihood of panic induced by water is extremely high. If you saw that video when yesterday we started, the guy fell into the water and he panicked. Most of the time people will die because they panic. They get scared, which is natural. Water is not an element that is natural for a human being. We're not born to be in the water like fish. So it's important to build confidence, right? And we train ourselves to react correctly when we find ourselves in a situation where water survival is important or imperative. Now, 70% of people live within 1 hour of a body of water, which is quite amazing. So if you looked at the area where you are, think about an hour away from you. Is there a water body that's it? Could be a dam, could be a lake, could be a river, could be a pond, could be a quarry that fills up with water. So you'll be really close to a water body. So chances of you coming in contact with water, it's there. People just normally don't think about it. So the likelihood that one may experience a water survival situation is higher than you might expect. As we say, it could happen even in the street, right? From flash flooding. So again, we look at some statistics from the US. So they say in the year 2000, there were 3,482 unintentional drownings, average of 9 people per day. So that's a lot of drownings, right? So it's something that happens worldwide. It's a big problem worldwide, right? So we only know this because they actually take the time to record the number of drownings or they track it. So some water safety and personal aquatic survival skills, things that we can do to make ourselves better or to make ourselves more comfortable in the water. So some of the skills we can look at is treading water. And don't worry about it so much. I'll show you what each of them means. So treading water, floating, safe entry and exit from water, techniques for clothed swimming survival, use of devices to assist in rescue, and then we'll also talk about cold water survival. As you see in the picture there, this is just a normal rescue. In the street, they didn't expect, you see the lady, she was probably dressed to go to work. Then she got into that situation. The gentleman also standing next to her, everybody here is just dressed just like they'll do for their normal activities. So it's a situation that you may get caught into. So if you're prepared for it, you're more confident and your chances of survival will be much, much higher, which is what we want to do here. So some basics. What is self-rescue swimming? Self-rescue is where we're assisting ourselves if we do get into trouble. So The swim lessons like this, they teach you how to find air and safety by turning and floating on the back and floating in the event of an aquatic emergency. So what they're saying is if you're to fall into water, you're supposed to try and turn on your back so that you can breathe. And you know, when you turn on your back so that you can breathe, you're regaining your composure. You're starting, allowing your mind to think, allowing yourself to focus. So that's why it's really important to turn on your back and float. But all this comes through practice. It may not happen immediately. So the first topic was treading water. So I want to see what treading water is. So treading water is actually using a modified frog kick. If you looked at a frog swimming in the water and you see the way it's kicking its legs, so that's the same thing you want to do, but we're doing it when we're upright. It helps you stay in the water and conserve energy. You use very minimal energy when you tread water. And I'll show you some images so you can kind of get an idea of what it is we're talking about. So we need to know how to tread water efficiently, how to orient our body vertically in the water, how to tilt our head back slightly so we are breathing, and then how to move our hands. So you'll move your hands in small circles like this. This is what they're talking about, small circles to help you stay afloat and use very little energy. I can tread water for an hour or even a whole day, just like this. Just like it's using very little energy, right? So it's something you practice over time. Lift your legs as if you're sitting in a low chair. You kick both legs out and bring them in. So your legs are going out and you bring them back in. They're going out and you're bringing them back in. So it's a timing, right? So that it keeps your chin out of the water. So you're constantly breathing and you're not having to ingest any water. So this is what we are talking about. This is that modified frog kick. And you see here he's keeping his head out of the water. And this is the thing that we really have to kind of work on. So that way, if you do fall into water, you're able to stay upright. And as you do this, you're conserving your energy, you're able to think, you're able to focus, you're able to figure out your next step. And this would happen if you didn't have your personal flotation device. So what they're talking about, orient your body vertically, tilt your head back slightly so you can breathe, move your hands in small circles, you know, and then even the legs, you put them as if you're in a sitting position and you're bringing them up and kicking out. So that motion keeps you bobbing at the top of the water so you don't end up sinking. And it comes with practice. Another thing is floating. So be comfortable in water. We can try using a flotation device. Align our body with the surface of the water. We keep our ears in the water. You lift your chin. So remember, the act of lifting your chin allows air to go into your mouth, right? So sit as if your legs are in the chair that shows in the picture. Make sure the waterline is at mid-cheek. So it's almost somewhere half there or slightly lower, right? Keeps your head centered. As the head is centered, it aligns with the body and keeps it straight, right? Position your arms correctly so that you're kind of floating with the arms on the side like that. You arch your back slightly so that you've got that curve in your body there and it's keeping you up. So bend your knees and you let them dangle so you're not using too much energy. And then it just helps you to relax in the water and you're saving energy, right? So the most important thing is it makes you comfortable. Now, one thing I must say about this is different people have different ways of floating in the water. If you're more muscular, if you've got more fat, that sort of thing, you'll float in a different way. So safe entry and exit from water. So we can walk into the water like this guy here. We can stride like the guy over here. We can compound jump from a high point if you accidentally fall into the water, and then diving, that's a whole nother lesson for another day. But today we'll focus on these other forms of entry into the water. So these are just different forms of entry into the water that you may have. So techniques for clothes swimming. If you fell into the water with your clothes or you slipped and fell, right? This is to show you how you can still remain calm, you know, and survive the situation. Because sometimes you panic, then you know your clothes get heavy, it starts pulling you down in the water. Then you start to panic, you start to ingest water, right? So this is some of the devices we can use, you know, to assist us in personal rescue. So you have all this other equipment that we had talked about earlier, and it's just the same. And you always good to have a bag where you can put all your equipment in. So if you get a call out, you're able to take off there, right? But the fact we need to remember is we need to stay calm. If you're not calm, you cannot think, you cannot do anything. And we learn our strokes by swimming and regularly practicing. Practice, 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 right? Just like we do with your fire equipment. Okay, some more devices we can use. So there's the ropes, there's the boats, there's the buoys we can throw. And just remember, right, always wear your flotation device or your life jacket, as you'd call it. However, if a person is in the water, either without a PFD or in need of additional help, remember this phrase: reach, throw, row, don't go. So you can reach out to them using a pole or throwing them a rope. You can throw them a rope. You can row out to them with a boat. But if you're not comfortable with the water, or if you're not trained to go into the water, don't go into the water, because you'll put yourself in a situation where you may not be able to come out. You've seen situations where somebody falls in the water, a child falls in, the dad jumps after them, and they both drown, right? So you don't want to get into a situation like that. Avoid putting yourself in danger with a panicked person in water, because they'll push you down. Because remember, they want to breathe, so they'll push you down as they try and get up to get more air, or they'll try and grab you. So it usually becomes very difficult. But in everything we do, remember, we need to stay calm. So let's look at some cold water survival rules, right? They have the 1-10-1 rules. So they say within 1 to 3 minutes, you wait for the effects of the cold shock to subside. When you fall into the water, you'll get that gasping like when you fall into the water, right? So within 1 to 3 minutes, wait for that shock to subside. Within 10 minutes, prioritize and form the most important things you need to do. Orient yourself. Where do you need to go? Where am I? In the first 10 minutes. After an hour, you have about an hour or more of useful consciousness, especially if the water is cold, right? So if you have kind of that in mind, it helps you prioritize and know what to do. So wearing a life jacket increases your chances of survival. There's hyperventilation. When you fall into the water, you start, or they can call it overbreathing, like you start to breathe in too much, and then it can lead to drowning if you're in the water. Cardiac arrest, vasoconstriction, narrowing of your arteries, meaning your heart has to work harder because you're panicking, the water is cold, right? Cold incapacitation, you get into water, you try and take a cold shower and see the way your heart kind of seizes or your breath kind of catches. It's kind of the same thing, but now you're in the water. So it's really, really difficult, and it can make you panic a lot. Hypothermia, you start getting really, really cold and your body is shutting down. So these are the things that cold water does to you. So we can look at the table here, right? And as we look at that, there's also this thing called circumrescue collapse, which means it's related to a drop in blood pressure as the person is removed from water. You see, in this situation, the water pressure of the body is lost. That also can result in hypotension in a subject. So it can cause unconsciousness or heart failure, right? Because you've been in the water, your body's temperature is dropped, the blood pressure is dropping, and then they get you out of the water. Some people, it happens to them after. Somebody could be rescued from the water, and then they end up dying later if you don't go to a hospital. So normally you get somebody from the water, make sure you take them to a hospital so that they can get checked out. So we look at the water temperatures, showing you how much time you have. So minus 32. Or 0 degrees, 15 minutes to consciousness. Survival time, 45 minutes. 0 to 4, we look at survival time, 30 to 90 minutes. 4 to 10 degrees Celsius, 1 to 3 hours. 10 to 16, 1 to 6. 16 to 21, 2 to 40 hours. 21 to 27, 3+ hours. That's in cold water, right? That's how long you'd survive. And this is if you're prepared. Now, if you're not prepared, then the timelines would definitely be a lot shorter. So cold water survival, roughly 20% of those who fall into cold water die in the first minute of immersion due to cold water shock. It will happen. So you need to prepare for it, right? It will sap your breath quickly. So remember, if you can't get to dry land, don't start swimming. You're better off staying where you are, zip your clothes up, you've got your jacket on, and sit there. And then you can use what's called the help or the huddle position. And we'll look at that in a little bit. Then remember, once you get out of the water, it's important to dry yourself and also watch the others who you are in case somebody's suffering from hypothermia. Even if it's a strong swimmer, remember the loose muscle control is about 10 minutes in cold water, because cold water, as you say, doesn't discriminate. It makes it very, very difficult for you to do stuff. So help position in swimming. HELP is the acronym for heat escape lessening posture. So it says there, the general idea of that is protect your areas of heat loss, your armpits, your groin, your head, your neck, your rib cage. So if you're wearing your life jacket or your PFD, you lean back, rub your hands like this, lift your knees as it shows in the picture. That way, you are conserving your body heat. So that's what they call the help position. That's if you're single, but if you're a bunch of people together, then you can use the huddle. So it's the same thing. You put all the stronger swimmers on the outside or the adults on the outside and put the kids on the inside. Benefits of this, you don't lose so much body heat. You increase morale because you're touching each other. Your skins are touching each other, human contact. So you're more comfortable, you're more, you don't lose hope, right? So it's good when everybody is on the same page. So, but if you practice this beforehand, when it happens, then you know to do it, right? It's no good to do it, to try and do it if you have no idea what you're doing, then, so you practice all this stuff and we get ready to do it. Cold water survival. It's not easy. Remember, once you get into panic, it's very easy for you to have distorted thinking. So you need to stay calm. Once you get on dry land, remember, take off your wet clothes, dry yourself, and avoid any signs of hypothermia. If you're in a group, make sure everybody's getting dry and getting warm again. If you can't get out of water immediately, you're alone, use the help position. Your group of people use the huddle position as you wait for rescue to come. That gives you your best chance of surviving. So there's some golden rules of cold water safety, right? And this is after analyzing hundreds of close call and fatalities. Practical, easy to understand. 1, wear your personal flotation device or your life jacket. Dress for the water temperature. If you're going to be operating in areas that have cold water temperature, dress for the cold. Field test your gear. Swim test your gear. And the last one, number 5, is plan for the worst that can happen, right? You plan for the worst, prepare for the best outcome. So that way, if something happens, it doesn't end up surprising you. So again, firefighters' lives matters. We are committed to the community. We want to stay alert, want to stay alive. And remember, as you go out there, do your work with pride. Put safety in every stride as you go out there to do your job, right? So in summary, this is what we've looked at, the basic knowledge concerning the characteristics and danger of moving water. We've looked at specific information regarding the hazards associated with rescues from moving water. We've looked at the cost of our gear. And also we've looked at information regarding basic equipment, skills that are necessary to accomplish our show-based or self-rescues from moving water. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope that we've looked at something at least that is enough to start a fire, not a fire literally, but a fire in our minds to get us thinking about this water safety. So over to you, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, James. What a great presentation. Really well done. At this point in time, we've got a little bit of time left in our official class. So we'll open the floor up to some questions. If you've got a question, you can raise your hand, place your question in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask your question. So feel free to jump in. Now's the time.
And there's no bad question. Any question is a question, so you can always ask.
I see someone asking if we can share the slides. Absolutely. In our training folder that I posted earlier in the chat, there's a folder in there for extra information. Give me a little bit of time to get that up, but that should be up there within the next week. Yeah. Sam, I see you've got your hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I appreciate there's a good presentation from James. He's a good mentor, really one. So when I always go maybe to the rescue, I have to make sure that I've got a team of rescuers, be it from my end, from the firefighters, those who can swim and those who can rescue, meaning that we have to know the equipment that we have and the resources that we have. And then that forces me to partner with the Kenya Red Cross, because at times we have families that maybe they need the psychological support, the PSS, the PPFA that need to be done to them. So I need like a team of around 10, meaning that I have to get the down spotter, upward spotter with the throw bags, so that to ensure that our safety is concerned. So, the same to those who will be giving the first aid, maybe to the victim, or to the family who have been affected if we're doing the recovery, because at times most of the recoveries that we're doing in Kisumu, there are so many that we're doing. So meaning that we are being called after someone has already drowned. They tried to, the local divers tried to retrieve the body, but there have been some challenges. So they wait until tomorrow again, then they will be calling us. So we partner also with the Coast Guards, who also assist us maybe with the diving because they have the full equipments that can support in such kind of issue. So I was just asking that coming up with this team, is it always kind of maybe a training, maybe before going or maybe discussing on what you are going to do and the roles that you are going to give them? Because I have a team, but most of them, some that are not involved in the water, the activities in the water, some are they are up there, maybe dealing with the families and so on. That's my question.
Did we lose it? Oh, okay. I guess what Sam was asking is like, which would be, I guess, a question for most of people, most departments would have. Not everybody on your rescue team would be a swimmer, right? So because some people are not comfortable in the water. So remember, each person can play a part. Some could be used as spotters, others could be used as people who look after the equipment, others could be used as people who deal with the gear, or people who keep the media away, or people who do crowd control. So every part of the team or every member of the team will have a role that is just as important as the person who goes in the water. So remember, when you have a team, it's always good to use their best qualities. There'll be people who are naturally adaptable to water, and there's people who the only water they see is in a cup or in a bucket, right? So there's no point putting the guy who likes the water in a bucket into the river, then we won't really be achieving anything. So to answer your question, Sam, is every person will have a role in it. Either it'll be a spotter, they'll be tasked with looking after the gear, or they'll be tasked with moving things around. Or so everybody will have a role. So it's just for us to organize it in such a way that everybody has a role that they can do and they can fit in well. And then you can also interchange them around so everybody learns the other person's role, right?
Then maybe I can add again. There's a recovery that I did in Kisii, and there was a crowd that already were assembled there. So I partnered with the Kisii County Fire Brigade and the Kenya Red Cross in Kisii County. So the first I have to give the briefing of the community of what we are going to do, having the spotters and also going to have the swimmers who are going to rescue. So I also told the community that because they were so concerned about the rescue. So what I told them that we have a team, another team to go this side of the river, looking along the banks of the river, and if we can get maybe that body, and the other side to also see if we can get that body. And indeed, it happened that the community themselves got that body along the bank. So it's also good also to involve the crowd in during the recoveries. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Those are some really good points. And guys, like Sam says, involve the community there to help you, because they tend to know the area better than you do most of the time. So get them involved with you, get them to act as spotters, get them to act also as to keep the crowd back. So that way it makes your job much, much easier.
Just to add something, sir, I think what Sam has said is very important, because what we have and the challenges we experience is first, I can say, the communication and how we do sensitization of the community. You realize that in the community, these guys are not aware that we need to get the information so that we react on it and engage a proper plan. Our communities really don't understand, because we have some open quarries that are filled with water. You might find some kids who go play around these quarries. You may find kids who go swim along the river and they get drowned. First thing, the community will try to engage and find some people to carry on the activity. I think next time we can try and work on a particular program where we have a sensitization of the fire, the water safety, all along for our communities, because this is very key. You find that you might have some time to rescue that person, but because there was no information earlier on how to handle this particular situation by the community members, you find that we lose a life. Again, I will appreciate for this class because I've learned something on the water rescue. I think I had covered just on the pools that we use, but for now I have an information on how to handle the winding water, what we get, because we have floods also, we experience flooding. So you can imagine that particular scenario is all packaged in one thing. And thank you so much for the class.
You're welcome, Tony. Thanks a lot. And he does also raise some very good points there. So we'll probably, going forward, probably with Africa Fire Mission, they look away into getting us more involved into this as we go along.
We have a couple of questions in the chat there relating to sort of ice rescue, hypothermia, yes, cold water survival. And one that you could probably answer really quick, there's the question about, the weight involved in the rescue. What if the victim's heavier than the rescuer? You want to touch on that quick?
Yeah, I'll touch on that real quick. Now, in the water, for most people, it's luckily the weight is not an issue, right? Because the water helps with buoyancy. So somebody as big as me, I weigh, let's say just for here, but don't tell it anywhere, I weigh like 50 kgs. So I'll be pretty light in the water. I'll be really, really light in the water. So the weight ratio in the water is not really a problem, and you can really move somebody heavy. And hopefully, if in November this is possible, we can do a practical example where you see somebody who is quite small pulling somebody who is much, much bigger in the water. So in the water, it's big advantage, right? Because you can push something that's a lot heavier. Right? And then the one for which on the ice water, that's interesting because for water, it's how you dress. You dress for the cold, so that way you don't get too cold. The less you have on, the colder you'll get, right? And the less you have on, the more chances of you getting hypothermia. You have clothes in the water, don't take them off. Keep them on. They create a layer between you and a barrier between your skin and the water, and it can keep you warm, right?
You guys probably don't experience it as much as we do, but of course we always have that saying, you're not in water rescue, certainly they're not dead unless they're warm and dead. Yes. So when you're exposed to that cold water, all of your body systems slow down, your breathing slows down, your heart rate slows down, everything slows down. So we don't want to write that person off until we've got them warmed back up. Of course, that's dealing with a lot of cold water. The other point we want to make is that you can drown, in a few centimeters of water. So it's not, drownings can happen really at any amount of water. So there's always that sort of hazard there. Fat people can drown, even if they're not floating. Even if there's not enough water, yes, for a fat man to float, yes, they could still drown.
Will drown, yeah.
Yep. We'll take one last question here in the sort of official part of our training, and then we'll log that off and continue with our tea time. Isaac, I saw you had your hand up there. Go ahead, sir. Isaac, are you still there with us?
I'm still here. Hello.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead with your question.
Okay. Yes. I was saying I need some clarification. I think at one point in my line of duty, we had an incident where a current swept a school child, and then in the process, she was saved. She got stuck under debris, and we quite had some difficulties. Locating and retrieving this child. Now, from what has been presented, and from the PFDs that I've seen, I've noted that they're just floaters and the like. I'm wondering if there's another type of a rescue where we can have some equipment that can allow us to enter underwater in such a case where maybe someone is trapped underwater, where you cannot float, but you need to go down. So I wanted maybe if something can be talked about that so that I understand, because I seem to be lost somehow. Because for me, this one, it's more like just talking about the floating people who are not underwater. Yes, that's where maybe I need, if something can be talked, said about that. Thank you.
Definitely, Isaac. Thanks a lot. That's a really good question. So you're talking about two things here, right? So remember, like what they said, for most of the swiftwater rescues, right? If you lost your victim and there's a strainer, meaning there's a pile of debris or something like that, chances are your victim may be trapped. Remember, the strainer lets water through, but the victim will not go through. So you may find your victim in the pile of debris, right? So now, the victim is in the pile of debris and we need to go down to them. Now, these are two aspects here. Now we're talking about scuba, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, where you have a tank strapped to your back and you have a breathing apparatus that allows you to breathe in the water. That's where now I think Isaac was going, right? But for that one, you need to be trained extra, right? You need extra training to do that, because if you're not properly trained in scuba, you may kill yourself, or you can end up drowning. There's scuba divers who also end up drowning because you'll panic. Remember, when you're underwater, there's no light. So it's not like you'll have a light showing you, here is the victim, or you'll have a blinking light that shows you where to go. It is pitch black. It's like in your room and you turn off the light. That's what it looks like underwater. There's no light. And sometimes you don't know up from down, right from left, right? So that takes additional training just to be able to become comfortable in that situation. Because sometimes you can go into the water and maybe your tank of air is for 10 minutes. And you go in there and you start panicking and you're like this. And in 2 minutes, you've run out of air. So you've not managed to save anybody because you're the diver, and again, you panicked, right? So this is just additional training that you'd have to do to get there. But that is the scuba diving, where now you're going to do a retrieval more than a rescue. So those are the two different variations of it. And that one does take specialized training to do, right? So I hope that answers your question, Isaac.
Okay, at this point, I want to thank
sure.
James for today's presentation. Just an awesome job, as usual. Thank you very much, James, for coming and joining us today. We're going to wrap up the formal portion of our training, but we're not done yet. Stick around. We're going to move into our tea time and continue with our question and answer session. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time out. We will see you again, same time next week. Thanks.